A Houthi missile targets Israel's heartland. Gaza descends into starvation, and global powers demand Netanyahu end the war. On July 22nd, Israel intercepted a ballistic missile fired by Iran-backed Houthis, aimed at Ben Gurion Airport. Hours later, reports from Gaza warn the last journalists may soon die of hunger. As civilian deaths soar, 28 nations now say, enough. But Israel and the US blame one actor alone, Hamas. A ballistic missile launched on the morning of July 22nd at Israel by the Iran-backed Houthis in Yemen was intercepted by air defenses, the Israel Defense Forces said. There were no reports of injuries or damage from the attack, which set off warning sirens in numerous towns across central Israel, sending hundreds of thousands of people to shelters in the pre-dawn attack. The Houthis later issued a statement claiming responsibility for firing the missile, saying it targeted Ben Gurion Airport. On July 21st, the Houthis took responsibility for launching a drone at Israel, which the IDF said was also shot down. The Houthi drone attack came hours after Israeli Air Force drones struck the Houthi-controlled Hodeidah port in response to the group's continued attacks on Israel. IDF said that the airstrikes destroyed military infrastructure of the Houthi terror regime at the port in western Yemen, after attempts were made by the Houthis to repair areas previously targeted by Israel in response to missile and drone attacks. Earlier on July 20th, officials at Israel's only Red Sea port warned the government that it was at risk of a complete shutdown without government financial assistance, citing the economic impact of months of attacks by Yemen's Houthi fighters on commercial shipping in the region. Notably, the Houthis began attacking vessels in the Red Sea and beyond in solidarity with Gaza, following Israel's response to the October 7, 2023, Hamas attack on Israel. The port of Eilat in southern Israel has seen a 90% drop in activity since, according to Chief Executive Gideon Golber. The Journalists Association for Agency France Presse, AFP, said in a statement that its colleagues reporting in the Gaza Strip are at serious risk of starvation, and that without intervention, the last reporters in Gaza will die. AFP's union says it has 1 freelance writer, 3 photographers, and 6 video freelancers still working in Gaza after most of its staff departed last year, and that along with a handful of others, they are some of the last journalists reporting on the ground in the Strip. According to the statement, the news agency's journalists in Gaza have warned recently that they no longer have enough strength to report, with one photographer in the enclave saying in a post on Facebook on July 19th.
My body is thin and I can no longer work.
Meanwhile, amid the worsening situation in Gaza, Palestinian media reported that 16 people were killed in an Israeli airstrike on the morning of July 22nd in the Shati refugee camp in western Gaza City. 2 additional fatalities and several injuries were also reported in a separate strike in Deir al-Balah in the central Gaza Strip. Additionally, the director of Gaza's Hamas-run health ministry told Al Jazeera that 20 people have died from starvation in the past 48 hours. Moreover, an Israeli soldier was killed by an explosion in southern Gaza on July 21st, the Israel Defense Forces announced, as troops began ground operations in the Deir al-Balah area in the Strip's center for the first time since the beginning of the war. The soldier was named as Staff Sergeant Emmett Cohen, 19, of the Golani Brigade's 13th Battalion from Holon. According to a preliminary IDF investigation, Cohen was killed by a blast from Israeli military munitions that detonated inside a building in Khan Yunis. On July 21st, 28 countries, including Britain, Japan, and a host of European nations, issued a joint statement saying the war in Gaza must end now. The latest sign of allies sharpening language as Israel's isolation deepens. The foreign ministers of countries, also including Australia and Canada, said, the suffering of civilians in Gaza has reached new depths. They condemned the drip feeding of aid and the inhumane killing of civilians, including children, seeking to meet their most basic needs of water and food. The statement described as horrifying the recent deaths of over 800 Palestinians who were seeking aid, according to the figures released by Gaza's health ministry and the UN Human Rights Office.
The Israeli government's aid delivery model is dangerous, fuels instability, and deprives Gazans of human dignity. The Israeli government's denial of essential humanitarian assistance to the civilian population is unacceptable. Israel must comply with its obligations under international humanitarian law.
However, Israel and the US rejected the criticism. Israel's foreign ministry rejected the statement, saying it was disconnected from reality and sends the wrong message to Hamas. It accused Hamas of prolonging the war by refusing to accept an Israeli-backed proposal for a temporary ceasefire and hostage release. Hamas is the sole party responsible for the continuation of the war and the suffering on both sides, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Oren Marmerstein posted on X.
Israel rejects the joint statement published by a group of countries, as it is disconnected from reality and sends the wrong message to Hamas. All statements and all claims should be directed at the only party responsible for the lack of a deal for the release of hostages and a ceasefire, Hamas, which started this war and is prolonging it. Instead of agreeing to a ceasefire, Hamas is busy running a campaign to spread lies about Israel. At the same time, Hamas is deliberately acting to increase friction and harm to civilians who come to receive humanitarian aid. There is a concrete proposal for a ceasefire deal, and Israel has repeatedly said yes to this proposal, while Hamas stubbornly refuses to accept it. The statement fails to focus the pressure on Hamas and fails to recognize Hamas's role and responsibility for the situation. Hamas is the sole party responsible for the continuation of the war and the suffering on both sides. At these sensitive moments in the ongoing negotiations, it is better to avoid statements of this kind.
US Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee also rejected the statement from many of America's closest allies, calling it disgusting in a post on X and saying they should instead pressure the savages of Hamas.